president has dubbed Liberation Day. In politics, persons who seek the support of their respective electorate, as we saw some months ago in the United States, they do so typically on a platform. They do so on a platform in terms of what they are proposing to do were they to be elected to office. And I think that is fairly straightforward to everyone. Yeah? We are members here in Jamaica of the global community of nations. And indeed, whilst the United States, or whereas rather the United States, is a global superpower, we here in Jamaica, though we are not players in U.S. domestic politics, we are often invariably impacted, as are many other countries around the world, by virtue of developments in the United States, decisions made by Washington. The U.S. President Donald J. Trump came to office as he did the first time around in January 2017 against the backdrop of several things that he campaigned on. Many of us here in Jamaica this morning, and certainly as the news came through last afternoon, would have been reacting with a degree of disappointment, angst, upset, quite frankly, at the announcements made by the President of the United States, particularly in a context where we are mindful of the likely impact for us here in Enterprise Jamaica. We have to be able to understand two things. Donald J. Trump is not the President of Jamaica. He doesn't purport to be. Donald J. Trump is not the President of the world. He's the President of the United States of America. So Donald Trump is going to do what he considers to be in the U.S.'s best interest. We may think that many of the things he does, and we may be of the view that many of the things he does are asinine, ill-advised, not well thought out, quite frankly, ridiculous. But though we may think those things, the goodly gentleman has a mandate from the American electorate, and the goodly gentleman is the 47th President of the United States. He is essentially someone who is advancing the interests of the American people, at least in his view. And so, stakeholders such as those of us here in Jamaica, at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, whether we like him or not, whether we like what his administration is doing or not, we have to focus attention on our house, on our affairs, and get our house and our affairs in order. Because the truth is that, though we are stakeholders, we are not the persons here in Jamaica who determine what happens in the great United States. You would often hear the reference, when the United States sneezes, Jamaica catches a cold. That is an instructive reference because it underscores the nature of the relationship between Jamaica and the United States, and I dare say it underscores the degree to which developments in Washington, in the United States, do have implications for us here in Kingston, in Jamaica. So last afternoon, President Trump declared what he describes as Liberation Day in the United States. And that is, he has turned things up a notch, as it were, in relation to what may be considered as a serious wave of tariff wars. President Trump has essentially announced a baseline tariff rate for countries around the world from whence the United States import. So a 10% tariff is the base rate. And of course, there are other states such as Malaysia and Vietnam and China and the European Union on whom President Trump has slapped even higher rates of tariffs. I gather in the case of China, the tariffs are as high as 49%, and there are 20% on some states elsewhere. And so, he is doing so in a bid, he believes, to level the playing field, because he says that America has been and is being shafted as a result of the previously obtaining global trading regime. He believes that the low tariff rates, as he puts it, have caused U.S. entities to be unproductive, uncompetitive rather, and as such, competition from other countries have outstripped the competitiveness of firms in the United States. And so he's seeking to balance that equation as far as he's concerned. And while doing so, he's asserting that he is fairly kind, he's fairly benign, because they could have gone much further in terms of the imposition of tariffs. They could have been more hawkish in terms of the rates of tariffs levied. And what President Trump has placed on the table as well is that countries are not only using tariffs to manipulate the global trading system, certainly relative to their trade with the United States, but they're also using other non-tariff measures, such as what he describes as currency manipulation, meaning, currency depreciation, lowering the value of your currency relative to the United States dollar, so that your exports to the United States are much cheaper, having regard to your currency depreciation, your devaluation. And so, Trump is seeking, in his view, to correct that mischief. Now, clearly, I'm just going to take a moment to indicate to Jamaicans, both in the diaspora and here on the Rock, that prior to last afternoon, there were no tariffs, as it were, on Jamaican exports to the United States. Trump has now slapped a 10% tariff on Jamaica's exports to the United States. Goods being imported into the U.S. from Jamaica will now have the base rate applying a 10% tariff. So what it means is that so soon as these announced tariffs take effect, Jamaica's exports to the United States will become 10% more expensive in the U.S. So if we used to export breadfruit, mango, canned ackee, canned callaloo, and other agricultural produce, those commodities are now going to be 10% more expensive. Because as I said before, there was a 0% tariff hitherto. Jamaica has a 10% tariff in place on imports from the United States. So when the U.S. exports items to Jamaica, we import from the United States, there's a 10% tariff levied. And the U.S. essentially, prior to this move last afternoon, accommodated a 10-0 scenario, whereas 10% tariffs were charged by Jamaica on goods being imported from the United States, while the US, prior to yesterday, charged 0% tariff on goods being imported into the United States from Jamaica. It was part and parcel, listeners, of what was dubbed the Caribbean-based initiative. It came out of that, of the 80s. Countries use measures and administrative action to impact its interests, to advance its interests, and to secure desired outcomes. There was a time when the US would have been considerably concerned about communist expansion here in the region and indeed the hemisphere as a whole. So it is what they would have dubbed their sphere of influence. So the Caribbean and Latin America, this hemisphere, is essentially considered by the United States, as far as international relations and foreign policy is concerned, as its backyard, its sphere of influence. Now, in a bid to contain communist expansion and give states such as Jamaica and others in the Caribbean region an incentive to not go the route of communism and not rock the boat in terms of offending the US, as it were, insofar as its strategic geopolitical interests. It had a trading regime which saw the US not applying any tariffs on the export of goods from countries such as Jamaica to the United States, while these countries could have applied a tariff, and it was 10%, on imports from the United States. So that is what, essentially informed that arrangement. A key part of that arrangement, too, was not just the whole notion of containing communist expansion in the region. There was also a quote-unquote benign thrust to foster the economic development of these underdeveloped countries, these developing countries, Jamaica being included. So that's how that came about. Fast forward to where we are at present. I made mention just now that President Trump, as President of the United States, is attending to the affairs of the government and people of the United States. Here in Jamaica, as is being done, it behooves the Jamaican government, it behooves Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness to attend to Jamaica's affairs and, of course, advance Jamaica's interests. And we saw that in play last week, consequent on the visit of the Secretary of State in the United States, Juan Marco Rubio. I suspect much to the chagrin of some. So the key point here is that Jamaica will always be exposed to and subject to the vagaries of geopolitics and indeed to the vagaries of action that ensues in countries outside of Jamaica, as we're seeing in the case of these tariff wars being waged by Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. In quite simple terms, listeners, our job here in Jamaica is to get Fiverr house in order. When you are independent, when you have your house in order, when you concretize and consolidate your macroeconomic stability and the economic fundamentals in your country, as is the case in Jamaica at present, you are in a much better position to weather the storm as it relates to the vagaries of actions elsewhere. Because yes, we live in a global village We are participants in a global trading system. We do not produce, quite sadly, much of the things we consume here in Jamaica. We have some way to go in that regard, a considerable way to go in that regard. And we are doing things in the present, the government that is, to advance that agenda and get us to a better place. That's why we're doing things like cold storage facility and increasing production support to farmers, for example, and manufacturers. A host of things are being done. But the fundamental point is that instead of doing what we would have typically done, you would hear some persons who call into radio lament and talk about what is, what who doing and what not. You hear country referring to Donald Trump yesterday as King Trump, and he does so in a sarcastic way. Yeah? But instead of the lament, we have to understand that, listen, the man up there, in his view, much to our chagrin, is attending to the U.S.'s affairs. And Jamaica needs for its leadership to attend to Jamaica's affairs. Because undoubtedly, the global economy is going to be in for some challenges, perhaps. There is likely to be inflationary pressures resulting from these tariff wars. Jamaica has to skillfully maneuver. Our industry, our manufacturers and exporters have to maneuver skillfully and carefully, because the truth of the matter is that even with the prevailing topsy-turvy environment, there are opportunities. There are some people who look at crisis and they see crisis only. But there are others among us who look at crisis, and even while there are crises, we can see opportunities. And so, exports from other countries are going to have higher rates of tariff levied on them going into the United States. Much higher rates than that which is going to be levied on Jamaica's exports to the United States. So that in and of itself is an opportunity. Because although our brochure, yes, our canned ackee and host of other commodities are going up by 10%, there are exports from other countries like Australia that'll be going up by exponents of 10. In the case of China, their exports are going up 49%. Their exports to the United States, that is. So even amid the topsy-turvy situation, Jamaica is still at the lower end in terms of the level of tariff, the rate of tariff levied on us. But what is discomforting on a morning like this is that inflationary pressures beckon. Because with these tariff wars, you're going to have considerable pass-through. You're going to have disruption in supply chains. You're going to have wait and see in relation to the lowering of interest rates, and what that is one of the challenges that we have here in Jamaica. Interest rates have not been coming down as precipitously as we would like them to. And as I mentioned in the Senate this past Friday, and as I have mentioned elsewhere, certainly speaking at an economics forum, a budget forum here on the Mona campus last Thursday, a forum put on by the Department of Economics here at UWI. The whole business of prospective inflationary pressures will mean that interest rates here in Jamaica are not going to be coming further south anytime soon, perhaps. But as I said, it is very, very important for Jamaica to continue to focus on its race, have its house in order, because the truth is that we have a stable and resilient economy, and the gains that we have made in that regard must be concretized and safeguarded. We run to the break, and when we come back, we seek to take your calls on 212-98.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, caller.
Yes, sir. I think in your remarks you mentioned Jamaica as a stable economy. Did you say that?
That is correct, sir. I said stable and resilient economy.
Stable. Let's deal with the stable part first.
Yeah.
Jamaica will. I think Jamaica will attain stability in its economy as soon as we have more and more of our people properly educated and trained. I think we have less educated and properly trained people as we speak. So you highly like that would get a stable economy in those settings, sir.
All right. So do you have an appreciation for what is being referred to when one speaks of a stable economy, Milton?
All right. In other words, you are saying that this tier has been set for economic growth and development.
That is correct,
you are trying
Milton.
to put from the Honorable Prime Minister. That's what the impression you are trying to convey.
That is correct, Milton. And I'll tell you why.
That is correct.
I'll tell you why.
Yeah, and I repeat myself again, sir.
Before you repeat yourself, because we heard it the first time. Before you repeat yourself, because we heard it the first time.
You should know that in your case, I know you're a trained person.
All right, so hold a moment, Milton. Let me share this with you.
Yeah.
In any national economy, you have a thing called indicators. It's when you operate a motor vehicle, you have a dashboard in front of you when you sit behind the steering wheel, Milton. You have a temperature gauge, you have a odometer, speedometer, and in the dashboard, you have all kinds of warning lights that may come on from time to time. Even when your handbrake is applied, you will see a certain light come on to indicate that your handbrake has been engaged, right? Now, in an economy, you have certain things that are called macroeconomic indicators. They are things, basically, Milton, that helps to gauge what is happening in the national economy, and they are used as indicators of the health of the economy. Not dissimilar to when you go to doctor or clinic, yes? And them take your blood pressure. They may look at your blood count based on analysis of blood, and they may do all kinds of other things. The doctor may use his or her stethoscope to check your heart rate, if your heart, beating, and how is your breathing and heartbeat and whatnot, right? So they are all indicators. It's the same thing that happens in an economy. So when we speak of macroeconomic stability, my good friend, we don't just speak off the top of our heads. There are some indicators. I'm going to enumerate some of them. I'm going to list some of them for you now. That gives you a sense as to what we are talking about.
Yeah, may I interject?
Sure, go ahead, sir.
So, in case of the most honorable Prime Minister, him announced a $1,000 minimum rate increase. So what Mr. Morgan, we hear about the indicators, sir. But when it comes to reality on the ground, that's different. It's different. We should wake up now and stop ground kind of the political gimmick, because that's not solve people's problems, sir. Right, sir? If it was Mark Golden as Prime Minister to speak now, I would have said the same thing, sir. Right? Can I get a look at history and leak one you, sir?
Before you come to the issue, just stick up in. Mr. Milton, I'm going to ask you for a moment to stick up in. Right? I'm going to ask you to just stick up in. Before you give me the history and leak on you, I'm going to give you a little bit of history on Jamaica. Now, we're dealing with minimum wage, Milton. In August 1999, the minimum wage was 1,200 Jamaican dollars. It was increased in January 2002 to $1,800. Remember you talked about minimum wage, right? Watch this again. January 2002, the minimum wage was $1,800. And when we say $1,800, these figures are essentially a weekly paid, the minimum wage that is, for a 40-hour work week. It was raised in November 2003 to $200, to $2,000 rather. So that's a $200 increase, Milton. Yes, between November 2003 and when next the minimum wage was increased, which is January 2005, it was increased to $2,400, up from $2,000, meaning a $400 increase. In January 2006, it was increased by a further $400 to $2,800. In January 2007, it was increased by $600 to $3,200. I beg your pardon. Let me come to some other years that you may find instructive as well. In February 2011, the minimum wage was $4,500. And in September 2012, it was increased by $500 to $5,000. In January 2014, 2 years after September 2012 basically, it was increased by $600 from $5,000 to $5,600. In March 2016, it was increased from $5,600 to $6,200. So I am making the point about the nominal increases in minimum wage. Yes? Relative in terms of point-to-point increases in minimum wage, to make the point to you that the $1,000 increase that you scoff at and other mischief makers seek to scoff at is essentially disingenuous. So let me finish the list. Allow me to, I'm finishing the list that I'm going down. I made mention to you that between January 2014 and March 2016, the minimum wage was increased by $600. From March 2016 to August 2018, the minimum wage was increased by $800, moving from $6,200 to $7,000. Then in April 2022, it was increased by $2,000 from $7,000 to $9,000. And then in June 2023, it was increased from $9,000 to $13,000, which was a $4,000 increase. In June 2024, meaning June last year, it was increased by $2,000, Milton, moving from $13,000 per week to $15,000. And come June 2025, sir, it will move from $15,000 to $16,000. Now, persons who may seek to isolate the 1 year move, the $1,000 increase, without considering the rates at which it has moved over recent years, are being disingenuous in my view, Milton.
Yeah, me don't want to say one different, but me don't do it. All what me say, to cut a long story short, only one thing can emulate them look a cheap reason. It's proper education and training, or mass education and training, sir. Right?
I'm going to ask you this, therefore, Milton. Do you see efforts being made or efforts underway as it relates to education and training?
Yeah,
I'm going to set an example. I don't want to just talk off the top of our heads.
Just allow me to finish, sir. We have training, we have education and training, sir. But what we want now is a mass scale training, even if we have to do it compulsory. Sir, right, and that time is long overdue.
Sir Milton, one of the things that it would be good to focus on are the things that are actually happening and not just the narratives that we walk around with in our head.
Mr. Morgan.
Hold on, man. I'm going to come back to you, Sir Milton, but just allow me 20 seconds. There has been considerable expansion in access to skills training via the Heart NSTA Trust. When it's not LEGS program, is LIFT program. When it's not LIFT, it is some program of some other names. Too many for me to actually even recall right now. Yes? The idea is that at Heart NSTA, the government 2 years ago, Milton, has moved to make skills training at Heart NSTA up to level 4 free of cost, meaning youngsters from marginalized inner city communities, rural poor youngsters, and a host of other vulnerable and essentially marginalized people in Jamaica, whether they are young people or not, because skills training is for anybody at any age. Yes, you are able to access respective programs at Heart NSTA. You are provided in terms of nutrition support as you access training, and in some of the programs there's even a stipend, Milton, associated with it. So what I would encourage you to do is use platforms like these and indeed walk around in your community and tell the young people and old people too about things that are happening and opportunities that are available, rather than hold on to the narratives in your head. Say again?
No, what you want me to do? I won't do that. And you know,
you will walk around and tell young people to go and access skills training.
Big man, this indicators that you have been promoting, it's not working on the ground, big man.
It's not working on the ground because you don't want it to work on the ground. Let me tell you this, sir. I just put a suggestion to you, which I think any well-thinking Jamaican would essentially appreciate, but you are saying that you wouldn't dare do that because to share...
It don't make sense. It don't make sense, Mr. Morgan.
It wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense.
After
it makes sense.
Of this administration, and
sir, Milton, stop talking your rubbish. Stop talking your absolute rubbish. My friend, sir, the sweeping adjustments at Heart is not something that is starting today. It has been years now. The legs program at Heart through the whole program.
You don't have to remind us, sir. You don't
want to be reminded. Okay, I understand. You want
you don't have to remind us.
You want to hold on to.
All you are saying, Mr. Morgan. 9 years of stagnation in an economy. I think that is more than enough, sir. You don't think so?
Sir, I'm going to share something with you.
Technically, this economy is stagnant, you know.
I'm going to share something with you before I run to another call.
Yeah, but it's a chump.
Harriet Tubman once said, I freed thousands of slaves, basically, and I could have freed thousands more if only they realized that they were slaves. So in other words, a person can only learn things to the extent that he or she is willing to learn. It is very clear. Sir, just pause a moment, man. It is very clear in my mind what your situation is and what your position is.
My situation, all I'm saying, sir, time come. Time come. Big up.
All right, Milton, big up yourself as well.
Time come.
Right? Scallion and sweet potato come too. And our sweet pepper, country pepper, tomato. Any other thing time come for? All right, we are going to go to another call here on the program. Milton has done his bit for the morning, and he, like those persons that Harriet Tubman couldn't get to, is one who simply has elected not to expand his horizons and learn. Good morning, caller. Welcome to Straight Up.
Good morning, sir. Am I on now?
Yes, you're on air. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, sir. First of all, congratulations for the work you have been doing.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
No, it's mixed race, man.
Okay, all right, thank you, sir. Go ahead. What do you want to share with us this morning?
Well, first of all, it is urgent for me, and I think it will be urgent for the population to know the real reason for the increase in the cost of living over the years, especially in the 90s.
Yeah.
Some of us know that cost of living has been increasing significantly, and probably more than significantly in other countries, especially like first world countries like America or Canada or so on. But I want to bring this out. I keep posting it on social media. I don't know if people are paying attention to it. The real first and foremost reason for Jamaica's dramatic increasing cost of living in the 90s is because in the 80s up to before the 1989 general election, there was a foreign exchange regulation control. So people couldn't just readily go to the bank to withdraw any amount of foreign exchange they want from the Jamaican equivalent. There was a restriction as to how much money they could get, and in some instances they wouldn't be granted the foreign exchange. Well, as you might remember, the government changed after the 1989 election, and the government who came into office, they changed that. So business people who probably they were just thinking of their own, they readily went and started withdrawing, buying foreign exchange.
So it's what was called a premature liberalization. So premature freeing up of the foreign exchange market, and that was really and truly what you can consider a policy failure on the part of the then Manley-led administration, which took office in February of 1989. Go ahead with your perspectives, sir.
Yes, so Jamaica wasn't earning enough foreign exchange that government could afford to make that decision. So what happened is, as to be expected, shortly after that, it created a shortage of foreign exchange. Okay, I'm going to give an example for people to understand more clearly.
Mm-hmm.
I bought a fridge in 1988.
Mm-hmm.
A 9 cubic foot, no for Samsung refrigerator.
Yeah.
For $3,700. Brand new from Exquisite Furnishing that was on Slap Road at the time. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You see, by 1992, just after that very irrational, careless decision was made, you know how much that fridge, take a guess how much that fridge was being sold for in 1992.
Double the price of what you bought it for?
No. 8 times the price of what I bought it for.
8 times. So,
yes,
wow.
It was being sold for $25,000.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the result of that. And then, of course, I learned of the 48,000 business people whose businesses were lost, and so on. And
you're speaking now following or as a result of the financial sector collapse
yes,
of the mid to late 1990s.
right, and then
Wrap it up now, caller, because we want to go to another call.
yes, and then so what I want to bring to the attention of the potential voters is that it is not because of anything to do with this present government. It is that. And the next thing I'm glad I remember before I come off the call is that the next thing I need to come to is that I was yes, so the public need to know that, because the two main problems people are having with governance or what is going on now is I get to understand cost of living and crime. The cost of living, to a certain extent, influence crime. So I need, whether you or anybody else who fit that portfolio or whatever it is, to especially during the campaigning, to let the public know that it is from that time, from that government.
All right, thank you so much. We know the perspective, caller. Just go back to listening to your radio, and I'll just share this with you and by extension the listeners. Thank you for your call. So, cost of living, what we call inflation, there are things that may happen outside of Jamaica or even natural disasters, things outside of government's control that may cause the cost of living to go up. But also, policy failures on the part of government may also adversely impact cost of living. And that is what the caller is referring to. It was policy failure on the part of the then PNP government of the early 90s that led to a lot of the inflation that we had in the country. But we are taking this other call. Good morning, caller. Welcome to Straight Up.
Marlon.
Yes, sir.
My plan is to call you, know.
No, man. We want you to call. We want you to call, Sir Marsh.
No, me can't take the garbage right out.
No, man.
And
Challenge the garbage. Challenge the garbage.
You have a feeling.
Yes, sir.
That the Jamaican people is an idiot. I just when you talk them thing that you say something in our vice note. Where you are going to do to Peter Bunting when you book him in at the Senate.
Yes, as I did on Friday. And every Friday when I'm there, I'm going to be doing it.
You never do it. But that way you say I got to do him. You say, well, you just done so a while ago. You talk to the man about the minimum wage.
Yes, sir.
And that somebody do that should have do to you when you chat the garbage. Because you talk about the increase where the minimum wage is over the years. But you don't talk about the inflation because when the minimum wage was $12, what it could buy, it cannot buy now. When it was $10 or $10,000, what it could buy then, it cannot buy now, Marlon.
Sir Marsh.
Stop go around and, now because you know it's a labor right, some of the labor right, them just set a damn jackass. You go around and you talk them foolishness there. What the minimum wage could buy 5 years ago, it cannot buy today. Even
First of all, Sir Marsh, you say over the life of this government between March 2016 and present.
Just before you go further, when you talk about the increase, them went over and over, you should talk about the purchasing power then and now. You should talk that. Why you leave out that, Marlon? It's only a set of thief, and we call them zeroologists. And them do them thing there, you know. You thief the people's mind. You come with the foolishness. You're talking a lot of crap. And
Sir Marsh, I'm going to ask you to...
Me come in. Even the $1,000 one I say when I put on now, it only a benefit the government because the education tax is going to go up because of the salary.
So you believe that we have a country where you can just make up things and talk any nonsense if you talk. So the minimum wage earner... Hold on, man. We're reasoning this thing through because...
You're not reasoning because you chat too much garbage.
You're not reasoning. Why are you electing not to reason?
No, me just call you to tell you, say you chat too much crap. And not you up on the radio.
Okay, you can't manage your reasoning, Sir Marsh. You can't manage your reasoning.
You talk too much damn foolishness and try to fool the people when people go supermarket and market. The pounds of hell and reach.
I want to come back to the minimum wage earner.
You're coming to talk about stabling and...
Can you just pause for a moment? Just pause for a moment. Me could talk about the minimum wage earner.
Garbage, man. I just want to tell you, say chat too much garbage.
No, man,
you're full of crap, man.
You're going to suggest, you're signaling weakness when you run like that, Sir Marsh. When you stand up and engage, you're signaling strength and intellectual ability and capacity. So now, let us talk about the minimum wage earner. Can you say the only person who benefiting is government? That was precisely the effect Lambert Brown was seeking to have when he said what he said on the program on Monday. But just to be very clear, the minimum wage earner effective June 1, 2025, will be taking home at least an additional 1,000 Jamaican dollars for a 40-hour work week. Yes, let's be very clear on that. Inflation outside of the immediate post-COVID period, has been fairly low and moderate in this country. I remember before COVID, there was even a point where there was concern as to how low inflation was, because what they were saying at the time is that if the inflation is too low, the country now grow. So inflation, we had a point before COVID, Mr. Marsh, listeners, where inflation was so low that we had the discourse, unprecedented discourse in this country at that time, which was discourse around the fact that if inflation too low, we would have a challenge in terms of growth prospects. Yes? And the truth of the matter is that it is for that reason and within that context that our independent central bank is now in the business of inflation targeting, seeking to target inflation between the 4 to 6% band. We can have our own opinions, Sir Marsh. We do not and we are not entitled to our own facts. I have set out what the respective adjustments in the minimum wage has been. You are seeking to suggest that that increase has invariably been wiped out by inflation. I am putting it to you that it is not so. And you cannot be among the same set of people, Mr. Marsh, who have been the czars and architects of high inflation in this country, particularly on account of your policy failures. And I'm speaking of respective administrations of the PNP government. Yes? We know what has happened. The gentleman who called me earlier just relayed what happened, and he cited an example, a 9 cubic feet fridge that he bought, and by a year later the cost of that fridge went up 8 folds. That's what the gentleman attested to a while ago. Anyway, we are up on the NPR News at the top of the hour. We come back at 10:10 with a discussion with economist Keenan Faulkner. Stay with us.
News Talk 93 FM. Heard everywhere. The time on News Talk 93 FM is 10 o'clock.
Contact News Talk 93 FM today via phone at 876-927-1660, extension 2475, or 876-427-9955. Email us at newstalk93fmsales@gmail.com. Visit our website at www.newstalk93fm.net.
This is Ira Glass. In Lily's family, there's a story everybody knows by heart. If this story had never happened,
all of us wouldn't be here right now.
Sammy wouldn't be here.
Nana wouldn't be here. Wally wouldn't be here. Anyone that we know wouldn't be here.
So what happens